Hello, hello, everybody. All right, guys, we are finally back with two girls, one rant. Today we are in conspiracy theories again, which this is just a loaded pool full of so many topics we can cover. Like, I feel we have barely scratched the surface. So, of course, being conspiracy theories, we do have our guest Kasey back, and a very excited ferret in the background. So, let's go to Discord. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hello.
Alrighty. So, hello, we have Kasey back again, and of course, Destini, who does not want to show her face because she's cozy, so we have her cozy emote there in its place.
Yes.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Always. As I was just introducing things, like, conspiracy theories is just such a huge pool of different topics that we can pull from. I have a feeling we're going to have you back quite often for these.
I'm always here to talk about things in the conspiracy world.
Well, being that we do have a lot of topics to pull from, where do you want to start today? Let's just do that.
How about we get started on the talk about that Denver airport?
Ooh, I have done digging. I can start with this one for
All
the most part,
right.
and then you guys can fill in if you know anything.
Take it away.
All right, guys, we're just gonna jump right in, obviously. But so the Denver airport, not many people have probably even been to it before. I've never been before. So when Kasey brought up one of the topics that she thought were interesting, I had to look into it. So there are several different conspiracies surrounding it. One of them is that there is a dedication stone inside of the airport. And typically you'll find that in any kind of airport or memorial place or something like that. It dedicates the stone to some specific thing. But on this dedication stone, you'll see that it says New World Airport Commission. And for those who don't know, the New World Order is thought to be a small group of powerful people secretly working together throughout history toward an all-powerful global government. So that's kind of suspicious that it would just be called New World Airport Commission, and the New World Order is thought to be that powerful society. That's just a small scratch of the surface. When you enter the airport, you're greeted by a gargantuan blue Mustang horse statue, and it's got glowing red eyes. You guys have to Google it. It's creepy as hell. Appropriately, it's named Blucifer, which I love, obviously.
Lucifer?
Blucifer, because it's blue. It's a blue horse, and it's got glowing red eyes, so they've nicknamed it Blucifer. Well, the horse statue supposedly represents the fourth horseman of the apocalypse, which, if you know, represents death. Not only that, the horse statue actually fell on its sculptor, killing him by severing one of his arteries. So I don't know. That seems kind of coincidental.
You think it's like a demonically possessed horse?
I feel like not only does it represent death, but the fact that it killed its creator. I mean, that's just kind of coincidental. Like, maybe, who knows? Maybe it's sucked the soul of the sculptor who created it, and who knows? Just a theory. The third thing is that it has an underground facility, kind of like Disney World, where you have that underground transit system where people kind of walk through, which is also a conspiracy theory with Disney World. We could do Disney World on a completely different day. But it is supposedly meant to act as an emergency bunker for the global elite. For those who don't know, the global elite is made up of billionaires, world leaders, politicians, and celebrities, and is obviously super sketched. And it's disguised as an area under the airport to transport luggage. Another theory suggests that there is a vast underground network of New World Order command bunkers. There's that New World Order again. And another theory suggests that there's a FEMA concentration camp for future use under there as well. I mean, if you see the pictures, it does look super creepy, and it does have some really interesting rooms with that just seem very bunkerish, if you know what I mean. Also, an airport construction worker claimed that the scheduled delay had been because five multi-story buildings had been built underneath the airport. So it's not only just like a one level, there are several levels underneath this airport. The same person, along with others, reportedly said that there was a complex network of tunnels beneath the airport where someone could easily get lost because of how complex it was. So there's that about the underground system. And like I said, guys, just research if you can. It's so much better to visualize what I'm talking about, or any topics that we say. But just seeing what it looks like, you can kind of you can come to your own conclusions and stuff. But essentially, they're trying to say that it's just for luggage, baggage, and things like that, where they transport luggage from one end to the other. And that could be true, but it could be disguising something else.
Like the lizard people.
Yes. And they have super alien meetings.
I have heard conspiracy theories that this is one of the places that is an entry to an even deeper underground network of tunnels that span, you know, the whole surface of the earth, where the lizard people live. And this is one of their access points.
Right. I mean, maybe. That's the whole purpose of this, is like, maybe.
Yeah, one of the theories have heard about like the New World Order is this is supposed to be the underground tunneling system that allows the Cabal to move around drugs, children, whatever they want to move around underneath, and that's like the main hub.
Oh, God. Can you imagine if one day that actually happened? That'd be awful. I've got 2 more points about it, and I'll go ahead and continue, because I know that we don't have this last too long, and we want to cover a range of topics. And obviously, chat at the end of this, you guys can say whether or not you think there's something sketchy with it or not. Just like
we'll
we
have
did with the last ones.
Yeah, we'll have our voting system again. Like, would you believe in it?
So the artwork in the airport is also very strange and very out of place. So if you look up photos of the Denver airport, portraits, murals, and things like that, you'll notice that a few pieces are very post-apocalyptic and also just strange. There's one realistic art piece in the center of the airport that looks like literal ruins in an apocalyptic form. It's like a stone structure covered in moss with grass growing through the structural cracks. It's super out of place and strange for people just trying to catch their flights, you know? There's also many wall murals that depict haunting images, such as 3 dead women from 3 different nationalities, a letter from a child that died in Auschwitz, Nazi-esque characters, and other strange symbolism. And again, it just, when you think of somebody trying to catch their flight, they're just walking through the airport trying to get from one gate to another, and then you just see these dark murals and such that just don't really mean much to your first glance. It's just strange.
And maybe they just had a different interior decorator than the other airports. I mean,
guess somebody who's really dark.
Super edgelord.
Exactly. But yeah, definitely take a look at some of the art in there as well. It's strange. Obviously, you know, art can be interpreted by each person, and obviously there's got to be meaning behind it. But what does it mean? You know. Additionally, the last thing that I found on the international airport is that on that dedication stone that I mentioned earlier, it has the Freemason logo very clearly carved into the stone. And for those who don't know, the Freemasons are a secret fraternal society that allegedly is the largest in the world. This secret society has existed at least since the 18th century, but possibly as far back as like the Middle Ages. The Freemasons have many powerful members throughout history, and it's made people suspicious about the organization's intentions from the very beginning. The date that the airport was dedicated on the stone is March 1994. And obviously all of those numbers equals to 33, which apparently, and I don't know because I don't know too much about Freemasonry, 33 is apparently the highest level you can get into or can get to in the Freemasonry. So
it's the highest.
There must be 33 levels.
I don't know if there's necessarily 33 levels, but 33 is a number. Like, honestly, I'd have to go back and do a lot of research. Well, not a lot, but some brushing up on it. But 33 is a significant number in the world of Freemasons. so high of an importance that that's why it's labeled as their highest degree.
Yeah, so 31999, 319, and then 1994, all of those numbers equal 33. So conspiracy theorists have pointed out that that does equal 33. And obviously Freemason, the symbol that's on that stone, I don't know. But those are the items that I researched. It's very strange. I don't know who's given the okay for a lot of this stuff, but it's just strange. That's the best thing I can think. The best description I can think of when you think of the artwork in it, just how it was built, just all those things.
So another interesting thing about the number 33 that also is the reason why the Freemasons have it is because in numerology, that number indicates someone who is a master of teachings, right? That they are the know-all of knowledge. And that's like one of the biggest things that like the Illuminati and Freemasons push is they push enlightenment. So that's also another thing that correlates with.
We definitely should, like, we could probably fill at least a full session on just the Freemasons alone. Because a little fact there is a lot of people believe that it stemmed out of the Knights Templar. Because Freemasonry
Yes.
started around the same time as the fall of the Templar. And were actually considered brothers for a little bit because they started around the time of the fall. So a lot of people kind of went from one side of the fence to the other.
Right, there's so much history behind the Freemasonry and then like how the Illuminati is involved in that and whatnot. It's super interesting.
I don't buy into the Illuminati portion, but you know what? I think it's definitely one, like, we could dedicate a full episode to that, and I think it would be fun as hell.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's an interesting fact that you do mention the Freemasons in that, Destiny, because, you know, if you look at most buildings that are widely founded, they have the cornerstone, you know, with that date on it. I actually went to a library opening ceremony in a little town up here where my grandfather gave a speech. So I think one of my great-grandfathers was a Freemason, actually. And I'm mad because my mom, they threw out the apron and the gloves, and I wanted to keep the apron and the gloves from it. But a lot of buildings will have that cornerstone with the date in it, and that also has a huge I can't remember the word. Meaning, something along that line.
Gotcha.
Implications. There we go. Implications. I swear I can English.
Yeah, it's very strange, the Denver airport. I didn't know anything about that until Kasey brought up the topic, and that's when I looked into it and I was like, "Oh my god, that's weird." Just it's strange. Like it's not something that I can say like, "Oh my god, it's definitely like conspiracies." It's strange. Whoever did it, obviously people are going to start
When we do
speculating
our
shit.
girls'
But
night
Kasey also
tonight,
said before we started
it'll
the
be
podcast
back.
that apparently the airport's playing along with it, and they've scattered around these like reptilian sculptures that talk to you and tell you the weather when you come up to it. And
My
touch
God,
it or
that's
whatever.
hilarious.
I
Yeah,
think that's kinda
so
cool.
supposedly Kim Day, who is the CEO, embraces the theories because it takes too much energy to try to fight and prove that their conspiracy theories are quote unquote wrong, because that's all subjective. But so rather than do that, she's embracing it and just rolling with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, keep in mind that so the building was obviously 1995. So something that Dr. Optimal did bring up is there were a lot of Cold War era bunkers. So it wouldn't surprise me if it was a bunker, is what he says for I hope a he. I'm sorry. I don't want to identify gender.
I do that all the
But-
time.
I know. Well, I think I see the name and I think male, but on the other hand, could be female. So I apologize if I am incorrect. But Dr. Optimal does state that it could be a Cold War era bunker, creating some of the tunnel systems down there. What do you guys think of that?
I think it's possible.
I think it's super plausible, especially for out there.
And like I said before, like they could be making it like right now it could be functional as a baggage transit area, but it could have another intention. Like if shit hits the fan, like that could be used as something you know, especially like FEMA. There was that, I remember that period of time where everybody was scared of FEMA and the concentration camps and stuff. Like they have separate rooms and stuff down there that just seem really strange to have for a simple luggage transit system.
Well, I think there might have been like intent behind it, like to build out a civilization in that bunker. So perhaps that area is like the holding cell area or the new police station or something like.
I would like to point all of you guys to the Fallout series games as far as that concept goes, because that's exactly what the Fallout series was built upon. So nuclear fallout happens. We know that we have enough nuclear weapons in the world right now that if we even launched a 10th of them, we could put ourselves into a nuclear winter for who knows how long. So an underground living facility such as that, that's how you'd survive. And that's what those games are based on, but it is founded in some kind of scientific truth.
I'm surprised you didn't bring up the correlation of aliens to the Denver airport. Do you know about that, Dustin?
There was a lot of different theories. I did not get to the alien part, so please enlighten me.
So I'll go there. You're right. There are several different theories, but I'll go with my favorite one, which is apparently, according to how the structuring of the place actually was built, is very similar to previous what are they, crop circles, and like the alignment and the measurement of it, of like the perimeter of it. So there's a lot of ideas that this is perhaps like an international space station area, and this is like where the international like galactic federation does its like big business meetings with like aliens.
I have heard of the Galactic Federation. That's another. I have to, let me write this down. I've got a project notebook where I keep all these different podcast ideas, but the Galactic Federation would be a cool one to dive into at another point as well, because that ties into like the Pleiadians.
Yeah, so the idea is the reason why there are so many different bunker rooms is because of the fact that this is where all these Galactic Federation people come down and have their meeting to discuss things.
Wow. Yeah, I remember reading vaguely about that one, and then obviously like the Denver airport. I read up about the conspiracies, and then what I try to do is I try to read the explanations of what it actually is. You know what I mean? Like their arguing point, like it's not a conspiracy, this is what it is. So I watched a bunch of different documentaries about both the conspiracies and people that are like, you guys are wrong, you're blowing this out of proportion, this is what it is. And that was one of the things where they were like, people think that lizard people and aliens come down here to meet in these underground facilities. And they were like, that's just strange to just say. But they didn't argue anything by it. They just said it's, you know, you guys are weird, basically.
Yeah. I mean, because like our world is so fucked up right now. Like, unless you're going to use us as slaves, like why the fuck do you want to come here? We are just so disorganized, separate identities across the board, which isn't a bad thing, but like we squabble and fight amongst each other like children.
Well, so one of the theories is apparently we meet up there, and the reason why we're allowed to be alive is because of the fact that we give them some type of resource, right? Now it can be argued what that resource could be, whether they're mining the water from us, whether they're mining us as humans and trying to ramp us up so that way they could utilize us as like cattle in the future. But there's discussions on.
I've also heard the possibility of one of our resources that we take for granted is quartz, because supposedly a lot of very high-tech gear, because I mean it's a mineral that can basically be a conductor for high amounts of electricity without shattering. So supposedly quartz is one of the things that they're after. Gold is another one because of its conductive abilities in electronics.
Right. So I do like the theory though that they are calling it out that there's more than one species of aliens that meet here. So you also get like the people of the theory of like mixing blood with aliens, and then those are the people who are actually leading on the, you know, New World Order side, everything.
I'd like to dive into the New World Order and Galactic Federation in another upcoming podcast, because that topic really does fascinate the hell out of me, because it is so plausible, and that's what makes for a good conspiracy theory. So let's break this one down a little bit. So we have the different theories. Let's start back with the horse as the original one. Think that was an omen for the duration or the basically the setting of the facility in general, that it's going to be a bad place.
Yeah, definitely. It's a possibility, especially given the fact that as soon as it was constructed, it killed its maker.
Like a whole Queen of the
So,
Damned thing.
I'm more on the fence of it being like the gatekeeping girl boss, you know, of the Galactic Federation. Like there's something about it,
Ooh.
whether it's a demon association or what.
Yeah, it's true too.
Dr. Optimal says methane gathering for their spacecraft. And Croc also says the aliens, Earth is the intergalactic conference room.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. This could be definitely for another episode, but it's such a possibility that there are aliens out there that could disguise themselves as humans, or maybe even look like humans. They're just from a different planet, and they visit us and they walk among us, live just like us, and then do their thing and then leave.
Cough, cough. Anunnaki and Pleiadians. Cough. But that is, there is a lot of information out there for those, so that one could definitely span a whole episode. So let's look next at the underground tunnel system, because that actually can lead us into our next topic of Lemuria. So before we go there, like the whole underground network of tunnels that they have, and possibly connecting to a natural underground cave system. What do you think of that?
I think it exists, but I think the reasoning for its original existence was like Cold War shelter.
I think it's just multi-purposeful. Like they could utilize the space to, how dare you, Mr. T? The space could be used to transport the luggage and things as need be. However, I feel like they were like, well, if we already have this space, and by the way, the mayor of Denver, as well as other big government officials, have to okay everything being done at this airport, including the artwork. So that being said, politicians, they have a big say in what gets done here. So who's to say that they had some backup intentions just in case something happened?
I wouldn't think it would be at that level, though.
Minor government, or...
I think it would be like major government. Like obviously major government does need minor government involvement in things. But I guess maybe if there was more proof for me that the underground system was larger than just like the state of Colorado, even, I'd say, then I'd be more inclined to believe.
I think their system might be, if it's the size of a city, maybe. I could see its backup use, like its front use is the airport system and, luggage from place to place. But like if shit hits the fan, we do have that seed storage that they have for like almost every single species of plant on this planet. They have seed storage for. So if something does happen and life gets wiped out, we can essentially start it again. So I think a backup use for this place, it's very plausible that it is a fallout shelter for people that either it's, the New World Order, or if it's just high-level government.
Right.
I think that's very possible. So now it's the time, chat. I know there's a bunch of different theories, so we're just going to kind of leave this one open-ended and in general. Are there any theories that you would actually buy into and believe? Or do you think it's all a hoax? 1, it's a hoax. Let's go 5. You totally believe in some of these. Let's see what you guys think. For myself, I'm going to be about a 3 because there's some that I think that are plausible, but I think about half of them are complete crap.
Still fun to think about, though. Oh, so Mr. T's been there.
Oh, it was very unsettling. Oh, is it as creepy as Destiny is describing?
I've seen the photos. It's it's just like you said, unsettling. It's strange. Like, why would they have some of this stuff in there? It's just odd.
It is really weird because normally things are just like bright and nature related and supposed to be peaceful and calming, and then you have this shit where it's like sounds like it's made of nightmares.
They literally have Nazi-esque characters in these murals. I was like, what? Like, I get, like, in a museum. Like, you go to his museum to see these things.
It's difficult
which
for a
almost
town to
looks
give you
super
that feeling.
ominous and dark for somebody who's just trying to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, so he says that he's just been in the town and it feels odd. And it's really strange for an entire town to give you that kind of odd feeling. I think there's only one town I've ever been in that has kind of given me that feeling. I can't even remember. It was so long ago. But, like, towns in general don't give you a feeling of weirdness. All right, so with the underground tunnel system, that actually leads me to our next one, which is Lemuria. A lot of people will lump in Lemuria and Atlantis, but they were actually considered two separate societies, different land masses and everything. And Atlantis is a different story in and of itself. But Lemuria was supposedly, let's see. So the theory was proposed in about 1864 by a British lawyer and zoologist named Philip Sclater. I can't pronounce that right. I think it's Sclater. But anyway, it was supposed to be like a huge landmass in the Indian Ocean, which kind of connected Madagascar to like Africa, India, and the west of Australia. You know, and it was proposed this way as a means to explain the presence of more variations of lemurs in Madagascar than are in Africa and India. However, in 2013, some geology evidence was found to start supporting this hypothesis that a giant landmass had once been there and then sank into the ocean. Now, whether that supports the lemur theory is completely different because they were found to have developed in Madagascar around 54 million years ago, where this landmass was supposedly sank into the ocean about 84 million years ago. All right. So, but the Lemurian people were supposed to be like this ancient, super advanced beings. Sound familiar with Atlantis? Well, supposedly around 25,000 years ago, Lemuria and Atlantis were the two highest civilizations on Earth. And the Atlanteans believed that, oh, well, all of these other races that are on the planet, they're inferior to us. So Atlantis said, we both should subjugate them, make them our slaves and use them. The Lemurians believed, leave it be, let them develop at their own pace, and don't interfere. Don't hurt, but don't help. So they got in a huge squabble about it, and supposedly that's why both civilizations fell. But a long time before this ever happened, the Lemurians started receding down into a natural network of underground cave systems that span across the Earth. And supposedly today, they have a subculture that is living in Mount Shasta in California, about 11 miles deep into the mountain. So let me see here. Now, depending on what you think, what source you read, it's also believed that Lemuria was in the Pacific Islands area, a landmass between us and Asia, essentially. Which is different than the zoologists' proposed location for Lemuria, which was the Indian Ocean. Lemuria is also called Mu, M-U, depending on what you look at. So this underground cave system also goes into a lot of Native American lore, that there was a huge calamity thousands and thousands of years ago, and humans had to go into these cave systems to survive because the surface of the earth was uninhabitable. And eventually they emerged from the earth. Now you'll hear that there. You'll hear that about Easter Island, where I think they discovered some underground cave systems there. You'll also hear about it in India. And supposedly the Lemurian culture is thousands of years old. If you look at pictures that people have drawn of their descriptions, they kind of remind you of the Aryan race. Blonde hair, blue eyes, very beautiful white-skinned, pale complexion.
Sounds like a Targaryen to me.
You've been watching too much Game of Thrones with Ferret. Wiener, floppy wiener.
I did Google it. I mean, not too many images come up from what I've seen. I do see some drawn depictions, and I do see the very structured face, basically like the super pale, like people who come from wealth, basically, where they are not outside all the time back then.
Basically, like anybody who lives in the North where there's a shit ton of snow.
Yeah.
All right, so I just did a bunch of rambling, so let me pause for a second and get your guys' thoughts on the whole thing about Lemurians maybe being millions of years old culture-wise, living in Mount Shasta, ultra advanced civilization. What do you think?
So I know that that's also like the society that a lot of people point to as proof that we had like a global catastrophe that occurred of like a whatchamacallit, like some either asteroid or it was like a giant war that turned nuclear, and it set us back all the way to where we had to start back all over again.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And Optimal brought it up too. Kasey, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with this, but the Vedas.
Yes.
Okay, so the Vedas basically say that our entire universe recreates itself so many times. Now, what scientists believe that the age of our current galaxy is matches up entirely with what the Vedas say how old our Earth, our universe is. And the Vedas were actually written a very, very long time ago. We're talking dawn of civilization when written language could be done. And they're actually probably older than that because Vedas are traditionally passed down from person to person through oral narrative. And so the universe expands and everything, and at some point it recedes and collapses in on itself and then gets reborn. And they also say civilization itself is created and destroyed at many different intervals through each of these universes. Now, I forget the exact terminologies. They have actual words for these periods of time, such as the period of time that the galaxy is around and then restarts itself. And we're on, I don't know how many iterations they said, but it's a couple. And we're talking billions of years each time.
Yeah, that goes back to, I know that there's like a temple in India that there's like rooms that are sealed off that the government has declared that nobody's allowed to open them no matter what for any type of research, even for like research purpose. And the reason that is because they say that those in there, there are weapons in there that caused that crisis that destroyed humanity, that caused everybody to have to go in those underground bunkers, and they don't want it to happen again.
And honestly, like I'm stepping ahead of the line here, but this is one that I actually firmly believe in, is that we have had high civilization before. And they're like, well, where's the archaeological evidence for it? Well, here's the thing. Look at any of these buildings from the early 1900s, farmhouses. Like, I'm in the Midwest, they're everywhere here. Look at how crumbled and down to the foundation that a lot of them are. You expose them to the elements and to plants and everything. Roots actually are rock killers. Roots of trees and plants in general break down those rocks and break them apart and crumble. Our metal rusts, deteriorates to the point where it would be nothing but a sand-like substance. So I entirely believe that we only think in terms of a couple generations. We're talking in terms of thousands of years. You know, this is a good segue to go into Globeklitepi, but, you know, there is starting to have some archaeological evidence that our civilizations are far, far older than what we even think that they were. And who says that civilization before was exactly as it is now? What if they were more ecologically friendly in the sense that their materials, their building structures, and their technology was more biodegradable than what we do now, and their version of what technology is and how to live? There's thoughts on that we, entering the age of Aquarius right now, are entering an age of heightened spiritual and psychological enlightenment, to where you can do stuff with your mind. You can do stuff spiritually and out of this dimension, so to speak. How do you guys feel about that kind of angle on it?
I honestly have not. I've not done much research as far as like the considering that the Earth. And now this comes from somebody who was very closed in. I was raised very closed as a child, so I haven't had the chance to actually look into a lot of these things. But it's very interesting to think that what we think as like ancient times isn't exactly what we are taught in school. I mean, they teach us a lot, especially in America. They teach us a lot in school that's inaccurate anyways. I can't imagine what things are out there that happened, thousands of years ago where we could have potentially been more technologically advanced than we are now. That kind of blows my mind. I'm definitely going to have to look more into that too, just to see some more evidence on that as well.
I think there's like a strong I like I do believe it. Like there has to have been, because there is coming like more and more proof that, oh shoot, we're realizing that humans actually existed a lot earlier than what we were thinking they existed at. Who's to say that like a nuclear holocaust didn't occur eons ago, and as a result of it, like we had to restart over, and it just keeps happening. There's a cycle that has to happen.
Right.
Well, and to go along with your mention earlier, Kasey, about a comet striking the Earth, one of the theories for people going underground, and maybe this is why the Lemurians did go underground, is that supposedly around, oh, I remember the year it was now, but supposedly a meteor did hit the Earth. And not an asteroid, because those are water-based, but an actual meteor struck the Earth and hit an area where natural elements for nuclear weaponry was found, because you can have nuclear reactions happen naturally in the wild, it as long as the right conditions exist. But supposedly the meteor hit this, caused the chemical reaction, and caused nuclear fallout all over the world, making it uninhabitable, which is why all these different races all over the Earth retreated into these underground networks of tunnels.
I also think it's just interesting that like we talk about, like, there is talk about like, oh, the reason why animals existed at one point to be so huge is because there were no like big predators or anything like that. Who's to say that like the Enochian aren't real then as a result of it? Like, who's to say we didn't have like a larger form of ourselves?
You're in the right
but,
place,
through
Lorelai.
evolution, we realized that it wouldn't work out for us if we were as big as that.
Well, I've also heard on a more scientific founded thing is that over the Earth's development billions of years ago, that we had a different chemical balance in the air that we breathe. I think there was a lot more nitrogen, which allowed for the plant life and everything and the animals to be bigger than they are now. And now we don't have as much nitrogen, so we're smaller. I don't know how true that is, but
right. And then you see like the history of like we used to be shorter. Like the average height for a male was like 5 feet tall, and then as the time has progressed, we've just gotten taller and taller. Who's to say that we can't get to that 8 foot, 9 foot height? That's a natural like baseline for people.
ooh, or maybe it's the giant bloodline that is a recessive trait slowly emerging through our DNA pool.
That too. Especially with the discourse of being like, if you're not 6'2", don't talk to me,
Yeah, because I'm average height at 5'5", but my entire family, except for my mother, is mostly 6 foot and above, at least on my dad's side. So they blow that average height way out of the water. All right, so let's kind of recap this one a little bit. So as far as the existence of Lemuria being an old, advanced civilization, and advanced is subjective, because a lot of people think advanced as far as our sci-fi movies go as advanced. Advanced can mean a lot of different things. But do you think that they existed? And do you think that they still exist, perhaps in Mount Shasta? Let's start with Destiny.
I think they existed. I don't think they exist to this day. I think it's very possible that they could have existed. There's many possibilities that could have happened. So I think it's definitely possible that they could have existed. As of, do they still exist to this day? I don't think so. But who knows? I would say at least they definitely existed.
Okay. Kasey?
I think there was an existence of some sort of different society that we wouldn't consider human to this point, but is like us being a descendant of it. But I don't think that they exist today.
How about you?
I definitely think that they existed at one point. You know, same with the Atlanteans. I'm 50-50 on if they still exist. I think it's plausible that there might be a cave system and they have the technology to keep themselves hidden because according to lore, no matter what lore you look at, they were very non-invasive, let everybody develop at their own pace and do not interfere. So I think it's possible they might still exist. But I'm more doubtful on that portion of it. And Optimal brings up another good point again, that about 80% of our DNA is dormant and nobody knows what it's for. And I don't know if dormant is necessarily the right word to use, but we have come a long way in identifying what genes are for what, but we still don't know what the majority of our genes are for.
Right. The Genome Project is just an ongoing project that, you know, it's going to take a while for us to figure it out.
All right, chat. So it's your turn. Scale of 1 to 5, 1 being that you don't believe it, 5 that you do. Let's just go with, do you believe that the Lemurians existed millions of years ago up to about 25,000 years ago? Do you think it's possible that they existed? So while we're waiting for chat to go through, there are some theories out there too that humans are about 2.5 million years old at the minimum, based on some new skeleton findings, fossils. So I thought that was an interesting fact, but there's very little information regarding that theory.
Or it could be alien remains.
Aliens!
Aliens! Maybe they were here and they're like, this place sucks, and then left.
They wouldn't be wrong.
Fair.
They were like, this place sucks. I'm gonna let somebody else have it.
Well, Astra says 4. Dr. Optimal is about a 2.69, and Cookie's about a 1.5.
Interesting.
But I do think the for evidence of, because, you know, I hate the archaeology whole genre of scientists out there, because they're very fixated on a certain linear development of things, and new evidence gets introduced, they discredit it right away. And I think the system is very outdated and old. We need different ways of validating the age of things and the possibility of things. So I think this is a good segue into Globeklitepi, which pushes back the date of civilization from the start of 10,000 years ago to much older than that. And Destiny, I think you were doing some research on that.
Wait, repeat that?
Oh, wait, no, I was doing research on that. Never mind.
What was I
'Cause
saying?
I know about that. Never mind, because I know a bit more about Globeklitepi. It's been one of those weekends.
No, you're totally good. I get it.
Ever heard of Doggerland? Yes, I have heard of Doggerland, because before... So real quick on Doggerland, have either of you ladies heard about Doggerland? And I'll give
I
you a
have not.
hint. It's in around England.
I have not.
Okay. Doggerland is a landmass that they actually are able to prove today. It's a low-lying area in the British Isles in which, you know, when the Celts, and actually before the Celts, and we're talking Ice Age era, the sea levels were far, far lower than they are now, like 400 meters or so. If I'm using the right... I don't remember if it was feet or meters, but I think everything was done in meters. So anyway, so this landmass is very low-lying. And so they were actually able to go there in the past because this was above water. And they lived there, they worked there. It was an actual Ice Age-esque civilization. So they harvested hazelnuts and everything. They harvested fish and shellfish. They did hunting in the area. But as the ice caps melted, the water rose and it covered up all of this area.
Oh, is this the area that they think that is similar to what's in the Great Lakes? Like, there's definitely signs that there was building structures there at one point, but the sea, like the levels of the water raised during the Ice Age, and as a result of it, that's how we got the Great Lakes. But divers have been able to dive underneath and find like these structural places.
I have not heard of that one, but that would be along the same lines. Because it would also explain why the Great Lakes are also so salty, because it was seawater that basically filled them.
Yeah.
But Dr. Optimal thinks that Doggerland is Atlantis. I actually think, because Atlantis was supposed to be west of the gates of Gibraltar, which would have put it in the Atlantic Ocean. But I think some things got lost in translation, and Atlantis was actually the Isle of Santorini, which has a mega volcano underneath it that blew the fuck out of the place. And it actually lines up, geographically, it lines up to everything that was described by Plato, which Plato's master actually got it from the Egyptians, because the Egyptians were the powerful trading nation at the time, and anybody who was away from Atlantis at the time when this happened or managed to escape would have probably gone to Egypt. But yeah.
Multiple Atlantises, you know?
I honestly think, because if Atlantis was an advanced race, as they say it was, I think they might have had... Because if we subscribe to one version of Lemuria theory, Lemuria was Pacific. I think it is possible, because look at the amount of space between Europe and America. I think it is plausible that another landmass existed there, and a lot of people think that that was mainly Atlantis. They also kind of point towards the Bermuda-ish area, because the Bernini Road that's kind of sunken in there was a constructed causeway or landmass to go from there to the island of Atlantis. So I think it's possible, just as, you know, the British and the Americas and the Spanish had given colonies all over the world, it's possible that Atlantis had colonies all over the world too.
Very true.
Unfortunately, chose the worst real estate possible.
Right? Like, never build on a fault line, never build on a volcano. Just don't.
Well, is it that, or did potentially this goes back to the discourse of there being like some type
They
of
do think
nuclear
it was the
holocaust
Minoans
that happened way long ago, and like everybody decided to gang up against the Atlantians and like destroy them?
I think it's possible too. The lore states that there were no winners in the War of Lemuria against Atlantis, that they destroyed each other. Everyone is alien according to Cookie.
Cookie's an alien.
Cookie is an alien. Now, some people do think that it was the Minoans that were the Atlanteans, but I think the Minoans might have been... Okay, so the one theory that's in my head too, it's like, well, if we had a very advanced civilization before, why are we only getting advanced now? And I honestly believe that, think about the people who invented and created this stuff and knows inside and out how it works. It's a very small percentage of the population. So let's say we did have a nuclear holocaust, or we did have some kind of natural disaster that killed off 90% of the Earth's population over the course of, let's say, a generation, through starvation, disease. Like, if we were to lose our internet and our electronics, like a massive EMP knocked everything out worldwide. We have no power. We have no, we'd have running water, but only for so long. How long through all the death and destruction until we're put back thousands of years technology-wise, because nobody knows how to do it?
Well, I think it also goes back to the quote lizard brain. At the end of the day, you need to just survive. So you're just going to go about it the easiest, best way possible when you're faced with those type of situations. And like generations upon generations of that are just only going to be thinking about thriving in their own way, which I think simplifies the way of thinking.
And you're absolutely right, because a lot of these very technical things that we know now would be lost knowledge-wise, because all you're thinking about is survival. When you're thinking about living day to day, just what am I going to eat? You're not thinking of how am I going to restore this power plant?
Right. Or you're thinking, oh, I need to burn these tablets so I can stay warm, or, make clean water or whatever it might be.
So I honestly subscribe to, because I don't remember reading that theory anywhere else. I just kind of put two and two together reading through all these things, that if we did have these advanced civilizations before, and for whatever reason, we took a gut punch, because they estimate at least 7 different apocalyptic events that almost wiped out the human species, which is why we see bottlenecks in our DNA from what DNA we can understand. And the last one being around the time that they think that there was some kind of nuclear fallout on Earth. which leads back into the Lemurian thing, but also the Native American theories and everything else. And I think it took hundreds of years for humans to return to the surface. But in those hundreds of years of not being able to go back up to the surface, how much knowledge did we lose as civilization? You're going to be thinking about hunting for food and growing your crops for food. Like, you take pluck a regular person out of a city, they're not going to know how to farm. It's going to take time for them to learn all the nuances with that. So let me bring something up actually with Globeklitepi. This was found in Turkey. Now keep in mind, this is around the area of Mesopotamia, which we all have been brought up to learn that this is the cradle of civilization. So let's go back 30,000 years. So I'm just pulling this off at the top of my head. And Kasey, I'm assuming that you're familiar with this topic as well?
Yeah.
Okay, so please help fill in the gaps because it's been a little bit since I've looked at this, but I love watching documentaries, especially on early civilization. So I've seen actually a couple of these, but it's been at least a year. And sometimes I can't remember what I ate yesterday. So we'll see how this goes. So this dates back to, at minimal, 30,000 years ago. They believe this was an area that was meant for some kind of religious belief, like a religious gathering zone. Now, there's a lot of T-pillar-like standing stones, like you would see at Stonehenge. But Stonehenge, we know, only goes back 3,500 years, not 30,000 years. Now, this area was kind of dug into the ground. There are carvings of all sorts of different animals that today are not native to the area. But 30,000 years ago, Mesopotamia was very lush, very green, temperate, maybe warm. I would say probably temperature-wise, if we had to equate it to something, I would equate it to like mid to southern America. It still gets really warm, but as far as sustaining plant life and everything, plenty of water and everything else. So these animals very well might have existed there. Now, the reason that this is such a significant find is because now, obviously, the place is dry, it's arid, it's essentially a desert. But they also don't think that civilization started gathering until 10,000 years ago. And now what they're not sure of is exactly who lived here and who did this. There are theories that it was multiple different, like this was a gathering area for multiple tribes, multiple peoples, like they would come from hundreds of miles away, and you might do this once a generation.
Yeah, I know one of the biggest theories too is that this was one of the first astronomical observation points out of that whatever issue occurred on Earth that caused everybody to come underground. Like, this was our first step into enlightenment, into building out our civilization. And that they actually have texts there that kind of describe what happened in that, like, word to mouth, whether it was a nuclear holocaust, whether it was an asteroid, whatever it might be.
Oh, that I hadn't heard about. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so there's actual text there that they've been able to kind of decipher loosely. And based upon what they're getting on it, most of it leads to the idea that some giant thing either crashed or exploded, and as a result of it caused everybody to go underground, which leads also back to the theory that, you know, there was a civilization before a civilization, but there was a lot of theories that this is like the center place where a lot of people would come and congregate and try and figure out what our next steps were for society.
You know, based on these other different kind of conspiracy theories and everything else, I'm starting to put a picture together in my mind.
Right? It's crazy how, like, everything can, like, come together like that.
Well, it really is, because, like, I'm taking the bits and pieces that, like, when you're looking at all of these things, and even when you're being skeptical, you're taking things that kind of just, it feels right to you that this is probably what happened. And I'm getting the picture that, because they do know that nuclear reactions can occur out in the world where the plutonium is found, and if conditions are right. And they do have evidence of different meteor strikes throughout the last 10, 20,000 years. So I think it's what happened is we did have that kind of explosion. You know, and think about it this way, like in apocalyptic movies that you've seen where they just orally, from generation to generation, pass these stories down, what kind of things would get written on these stones to try to remember what happened? It would be put in a very basic form, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so like one of the things that also points to it is they say that the pictures of animals that they depict on there, not only is it what you're saying that it isn't necessarily animals that you would think would be existing in that location, it's also just animals in general that were extinct.
Yeah.
But it's also animals from like all over different types of the globe. So I do think that it is like a congregation point that once people did start coming out from underground, word got around of being like, hey, you know, let's try and make this the site and figure out what happened. And like there was some sort of peace and agreement of being like, how do we further ourselves in this society?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the interesting thing is Globeklitepi actually got filled in. It was man-made. The fill-in was. So for some reason, they felt it necessary to actually fill this in, which is what preserved it. Now, what do you think might reasons be that they would fill it in like that?
So I think personally that it was just another war that happened, that like someone was like, well, now that I know and remember things and we're starting to advance, I want my group to survive better than y'all. So let's go ahead and wage some war. And I think a war did happen eventually, and they tried to fill it up as a way to like get rid of that and get rid of the past and build up their own nation of being like, this is who we are now. But in that process, I think they just didn't know that it would actually preserve it.
I think that's possible. So far, Destiny, like, what are your thoughts about all of this?
I'm soaking it in. I'm learning a lot of things I did not know before, so just keep going.
She's processing.
I am.
Girl, when I move up there, you and I are just gonna watch hours after hours of videos together.
And drinking. Yes, I'm down.
Why do I have to live so far away?
We'll take a
talk about
visit.
it. Yeah, we'll do like a televisation together.
But no, I think this is a place that kind of really points out and highlights the fact that we did have civilization before what we know as civilization now. Because I think it did get majorly disrupted to the point where, you know, we forgot all these mechanical and technical things, and they had to focus on survival of it all.
Right, and I do think there did come a point once they did reach of like stability that eventually then at that point you're trying to figure out, well, how big is this space? You know, is there anything out there like me? Just like what we're doing now with the space exploration of being like, you know, there's got to be more than just us.
You know what? I wonder if that's why there's such more of a focus on space exploration than of our own planet. Because think about how much of underwater spaces are undiscovered and how much archaeological evidence that there might be, because the sea levels are higher. In those days, people lived in coastal areas. I think there might be more evidence around the coastal areas like Doggerland to point towards high civilization. There's even, especially in India, which is supposedly the oldest civilization on the entire planet, which would make sense because they would have moved in there from Mesopotamia. But think about all the areas that are underwater now in those places that we could do underwater exploration for. C4 map.
Do you think it's interesting that we've invested so much more energy into the technologies of building something that could get us further and further into space than something that could allow us to go deeper and deeper into the water?
I know, and I think I find that backwards because, like, yeah, we do space exploration, but think about all the meaningful things because the Egyptians were ahead of their time, but the Egyptians even say that they are older than their civilization claims to be. And they were very advanced, like using moldy bread to treat sickness. Early penicillin. You know, using honey for burns and wounds because it's naturally antibacterial.
Right. I think that goes back to like just the generations of word of mouth of remembering how to do things from their previous lives above Earth before they had to go on.
Oh, Optimal brings up such a good point that highlights what we're saying. All right, so the ancient Greeks supposedly didn't have a clue how to build geared mechanisms, but they did, and they're finding evidence of it now. And I think that really goes into an earlier statement where the archaeology foundations are just so narrow-minded in, based on what they find, like pottery shards. We need to have pottery shards. Bitch, what if they didn't use pottery? What if they used woven baskets that were sealed with clay?
Oh, this is where I'm like punching the air because of the Library of Alexandria, because I feel like so many of those questions could be answered there.
Oh, I know. Okay, so I don't know if I wish I had a picture of that chart to bring up here, but are you familiar with progression? The cycle of the stars. So it's like a 26,000 year cycle with about 2,500 being for each of the 12 constellations.
Yeah, that's something that's pointed out in like anywhere that you go around the world is there's some sort of belief system that explains that.
Yeah, I mean, the Vedas even explain it. I believe the Chinese had explained it at one point too. I think the Native Americans had their own, but it was actually told in folklore, not in more scientific terms like they did in India. But it's everywhere, such as the Sphinx. And I know I'm getting a little off topic, but the Sphinx, being a lion head, pointed the way it is at the time that it was built, back when Egypt was actually very temperate, not arid, which is why there's water weathering on it. It was actually pointing towards Leo. But to go with this too, there's also the mental enlightenment, I guess is the best way that I could put it, because we measure things as far as physical and material progression. Back then, it was supposed to be a golden age for mental awakening. Like, people talk about auras and energy and how that helps with healing and everything else. That is something I believe in. And I think they had a very good grasp on how all of that intertwined with the physical. And we went into what they consider the dark ages. And that's where it's all the material, all the possessiveness, all the wars, everything. And that's where we have been for the last 10, 15,000 years. Well, we're now emerging from that because the age of Jesus, represented by two fish, was the age of Pisces. The age of Jesus began around the age when the age of Taurus ended. And now we enter the age of Aquarius. Now look at what happened during the age of Pisces. Very, very religious. Zealots all over the place. So many wars fought in the name of religion. Now that we're entering the age of Aquarius, we're getting away from religion. And we're focusing a lot more on technology, new horizons, and new possibilities. So I'm wondering, once we end the age of Aquarius to whatever age is next, if we will enter a more of a spiritual enlightenment phase. But I thought it was just kind of interesting on how these major world events and what happened within each one follows progression.
Interesting.
I think it's definitely something to be said about the age of Aquarius, and we're definitely into that era now that we're going to see some holy shit moments that kind of click and make more sense about like who we are, where we come from, and everything like that. That are going to be like proof. It's going to be proof that like scientific to us rather than what we were trying to explain through religion.
I think so too, because I think that during the age of Pisces, and I mean, this is going to sound like a conspiracy theory in and of itself, but the leaders of organized religion, I'll just say organized religion because I don't follow an organized religion, but I have my own faith, using it as a way to control populations and the masses. And I think because they did that, they got away from the original teachings of what their religions were. Because you look at the Gnostic religion of Christianity is completely different than Catholicism, Lutheranism. And while in Catholicism was basically the first version of Christianity, you had all these different sects break off afterwards because they didn't believe the way that the things were being done was right. But Catholicism varies very different now from what it did back in Constantine's time, and it varied differently then from around 20 CE. So,
especially as far as like, there's a textbook out there that I've read called The 8 Theories of Religion, which is basically the 8 key points that you need to build off of religion. And then out of that text source, a lot of people have used it as a reference for being like, see, what you build out of that allows you to potentially control a larger society and determine what happens in that society.
Well, I mean, just look at the popes in the medieval era. They can make or break kings.
Right. And I mean, like you said, literal wars were fought over because of the religion.
Because it was, and here's a funny thing to think about too. Because Catholicism was embraced by the Romans, so many parts of the Catholic Church is Roman. So much of the Bible does not talk about the Romans in a bad light at all. And even the way that they structured their church and continued to treat the world afterwards through religion is very Roman. Killing off other religions for not following their way is very Roman in the sense that, oh, we're going to do a preemptive strike on this area because we think they might be a threat to us. And they just did it under the pretense of religion instead of a pretense of a country.
Yep.
I do apologize. I know that got us majorly off track, but Globeklitepi kind of opens up that whole can of worms because I think it is proof of older civilizations back when we were, I like to think that we were in the age of high mental enlightenment when a natural catastrophe struck. Forced everybody underground. As soon as we're able to support life on Earth again, we're coming back, kind of as children, so to speak, trying to learn how to survive again. And being that we were set into the dark ages at that point, human nature is to war when we don't understand and don't agree with somebody else. It's kind of like there's no debates anymore. It's all arguments.
Right. It's easier to be aggressive and get rid of the potential thing that scares you at the end of the day because you don't understand it or don't know it.
And I think that's why there was the fall of Globeklitepi. There's no sign of actual civilization as far as living there, although there might be some temporary structures or dwellings. There's a very large portion. I think Globeklitepi represents maybe 2% of the overall area that could be excavated.
So I want to ask this question. What do you think brought us out from underground?
Time. I think over time, because I'm getting this forming in my head now, because that it really was nuclear fallout. I think that over time, because they would have access to the surface, and every so often they can go up, like every year or every couple of years, to see if plant life is supported, if people get sick from being up there too long. And that over time, they figured out that, hey, we can leave now. And so at different intervals, people decided to just finally leave and start living on the surface because your resources underground are going to be limited.
I agree. I think it was like the more they ventured out further and further from the underground dwellings, the more they felt more confident of being like, hey, we can actually, be up here for a decent amount of time.
Yeah. Because what do you think is the reason that they actually left? Was it about the same thing?
Yeah, I think there was some type of giant war that occurred and everybody had to go underground because the surface area was no longer livable.
I'm wondering if Destini and Kasey, do you think we should add the whole underground network of tunnels to another podcast for like early civilization? Because it is fascinating. They have found an area, I want to say it was India, where there was multiple levels, even like multiple stories underground of a cave network where they would use aquifers and naturally occurring water for water there. There was ventilation shafts, so you'd have air to breathe and all this other stuff, and areas to keep cattle even or other kinds of animals for survival. I think that's something that we could return to because there is a ton more information than what we've stated here.
Yeah, well, like I said before, there's several different evidences of underground systems, even at Disney World, where there's conspiracy theories behind what these underground systems were used for. And I'm sure, and even the Underground Railroad kind of system. So that's definitely something that we can pick up on and brush on next conspiracy podcast.
Yeah, and then the French catacombs finally being 3D like mapped out right now.
Mhm.
Oh my God.
See where that goes.
We're gonna have to have like a powwow or something because you have found some very interesting stuff I would love to see. All right, so I think that pretty much does it for Globeklitepi. I really feel like the civilization is far older than we thought, and we can definitely return to the subject. I would love to return to this subject because the stuff about Disney World Destiny, I want to hear about that sometime.
Definitely. There's a lot of conspiracy theories with Disney World and Disney in general.
All right, so what else did we have that you wanted to cover today? I think Casey's got the next subject.
Yeah.
Yeah, so so the thing that really got me into conspiracy theories were probably like I got this book when I was younger, and it was basically cults, conspiracies, and theories that shape the United States, right? And one of them, like, dedicated an entire section that was to secret societies. And secret
Ooh.
societies, I always think are interesting.
That is a good one.
Right? Since we're talking about the New World Order, one of the groups that is called out as being potential to the New World Order that I would like to talk about is the Bone and Skulls of Yale. Are you two familiar with?
I have heard of it, yes. And wasn't President or former President Bush a member of that, or was that a different society?
So he was, and there's actually been several presidents and also people within the United States system in some capacity that's like high level that's been affiliated with the Skull and Bones, whether it's out of the Skull and Bones or the subsidiary, the Owl Society that a lot of people have heard about thanks to Alex Jones and his recording of what happens at the Owl Society. But yeah, so the Skull and Bones was founded in 1832. It was some guy. A lot of people go back and forth on this as far as like if it's an actual real society or if it was just like some dude who was just like, I think this is really cool. I want to do this over in the United States. So it goes back to this gentleman who founded it in Yale after doing a sabbatical in Germany for like 3 years, where he got introduced to Freemasonry. And he wanted to take something like that and bring it to the United States. So the place he brought it to was his college town when he went back to the United States, which was in Yale. And out of that actually has formed other secret societies, but the most prominent and well known is the Skull Bone Society. And out of there, they have super secret meetings, and there's a lot of funding that they do for Yale that has caused a lot of conspiracy theories to crop up as a result of them. They only allow 15 new members a year, and they basically pick you out either by legacy, how well they view you, and how well you're gonna fit into like pushing whatever agenda that they have, or your popularity there, which I think is super interesting. But basically, they bring you in, they vet you out, and they figure out whether or not you can be here. Women could not be a part of it until 1992. John Kerry was actually the biggest advocate to being like, nah, we need more women around here. But even though women are allowed to join now, they aren't allowed to go to all the secret areas and the secret meetings. They're only invited to like some things.
The fuck?
Yeah.
Sexists.
This group has an obsession with death and like everything dying, right? And it all goes back to the founder and his obsession with Freemasonry and death cults that he got interested while he was in Europe. So one of the things that they have you do as a pledge is when you get pledged in, you have to strip down naked, go into this coffin and stay there overnight, and then in the next morning they come and get you, and you're reborn into this society of the Brotherhood of Death. Doesn't it sound so edgelord?
It does, but it also kind of reminds me of other cults and religions where they believe that death was not the end. You've got the whole cycle of rebirth and everything else, and as well as consciousness existing beyond death. So I'm wondering if that has something to do with it. it's kind of like with the priest class of Egypt, where they had all of this kind of knowledge and everything else that only elites were allowed to be initiated into and learn about. It's kind of like those religious orders went into like the secret cults and societies.
Right, and I think that's what these secret societies honestly were, is they were just fancy cults, and they were super selective on who they allowed. And they all were able to wipe everything off of being like, we're enlightened people because we're scholars, you know, we're scientists and everything like that. Only smart people are allowed here. But one of the most interesting things that comes out of this society that I want to talk about with y'all is as far as the Bush's connection to them, and how I personally think Bush is the one who called the shots for JFK's assassination.
Wait, Bush or Senior?
Senior.
Okay.
His son is just a scapegoat, or not scapegoat, but just like a puppet.
Yeah, I really felt like he was just this little pawn, little boy pawn that people like to push around because of his lineage.
Yeah, essentially. The only reason he gets invited to parties is honestly just because of his dad and what his dad's done.
I don't want to go to this party. Can I go?
That's essentially how he is. Like, there are stories upon stories of him just being like blackout drunk all the time at fraternities and everything like that. And the only reason he passes and does anything is just because his dad pays millions upon millions into Yale through the Skull and Bones Society or fraternity.
All right, so let's hear more about that. I'd be interested to hear what the connection to all this is.
Okay, so I'm gonna run through this, so bear with me on it. So during the assassination that occurred, it was found that Bush was there in his office and right down like a few streets away from where the assassination actually occurred, which honestly isn't that weird, because at that time he was actually going through and wanting to become a statesman and get into politics. So it would make sense why he would be there at the same time and everything like that. But a lot of the reasoning that I think that really holds up with it is because of Bush's family comes from a very long line of oil barons, and like they own a lot of the oil fields that are found in the United States, right? And during JFK's presidency is he actually wanted to start taxing those families very heavily and being like, hey, you've, made billions upon billions of dollars. It's time that, you start paying your share of it. Obviously, this pisses off a lot of people. So the theory is he goes ahead and he calls up the current CIA member, who incidentally was also the person who actually built the foundation of the CIA out of Truman's presidency. He was actually the Secretary of War, and Truman begged him to build out this CIA because he wanted to be able to build out an intelligence operation that could be able to figure out what's going on all around the world and keep our hands in all the honeypots. The guy who originally was the Secretary of War, Robert Lovett, was like, nah, I'm not interested, deuces, I'm gonna leave. Truman kept begging him and begging him and begging him, and he was like, fine, you know what? I will be head of your CIA, but you have to let me be in charge of recruiting. So he's like, fine, whatever. So at that point, he goes ahead and he recruits all his Skull and Bone buddies, and they go ahead and they start building out the CIA, and they start determining what to investigate and what to look into, right? Well, Bush ends up going to Yale, becomes a member of the Skull and Bones, and as a result of it, now is buddies. So in hearing that, Bush hears that all this taxation is going to start happening and his family is going to lose millions of dollars because they're going to have to actually be taxed now, he goes ahead and makes a call to the CIA and says, hey, I don't like this, go ahead and kill him. I actually have a guy for you that could do it for you. And this is where Oswald comes in. And the reason he knows Oswald is because his cousin, who's one of his best friends, is actually best friends with him. And he actually pushed him to become friends with Oswald and go ahead and like go through with, there's like back and forth Discord on it as far as like if he like corrupted him and like turned him into a zombie and let him do it, or whether he just became his friends and started planning ideas of being like, yeah, you should go ahead and you should be the one to like kill JFK and everything like that. So the assassination occurs. People are like, huh, this is kind of weird. So they ask him, they're like, hey, what were you doing on that day? And Bush, to this day, is like, I don't know. I can't remember. Which, kind of weird, but whatever, right? So it keeps going on. And then years later, as part of the declassified project of the JFK assassination, you see that the CIA operative, the head of the CIA made 2 people aware of the whole situation and what was going on. Those 2 people were Bush and the Secretary of State. Those were the only 2 people who were involved. Bush actually didn't become a part of the CIA until 17 years later when he became the head of CIA, right? And the day he became head of CIA, his cousin that I talked about earlier, wrote him a letter and said, hey, I'm getting a lot of flack for this. I need you to bring me out of this and everything. Bush was like, I have no idea who you are. And then everything started coming out of being like, hey, actually you do. This is literally your cousin. You know who he is. And he was like, nah, that's not me and everything like that. 3 months later, his cousin mysteriously dies. And that's where we're at.
Dun, dun, dun.
All right, that was a lot to take in and kind of process for a minute.
I know, it's a lot. There's a lot more details into it, but those are like the big bullet points that I wanted to hit out as far as like my theory of being like, yes, I believe in that theory.
All right, so let me start back with the whole Bush family in general. Like,
Yes.
how far, like, do they go back a lot of generations to like the early oil processing? Like, I think they started in Texas.
Oil was becoming like a big commodity, his family actually was the one who invested in it and actually went out to go find these oil fields.
Okay, so that brings us back to like Old West days.
Yes.
Okay. And brain fart. Shit.
I know I threw a lot at y'all.
All right. So, I mean, because there's a lot of different theories about the assassination itself. But, so Bush is basically was using the whole Skull and Bone Society as a launching platform for it to help provide the funding for this kind of stuff.
Right. So the theory is, like, I do believe that the CIA was involved in some way with JFK's assassination. As far as why it was involved, whether it was because of the fact of the taxation that, like, the Bush's family would be dealing with, or whether it was because of the fact that he was pushing such progressive policies that would unite people and that upset a lot of people, which coincidentally, the Owl Society I was speaking to previously, that's like an offshoot off of the Skull and Bones, every single Republican president except for Trump since like 1932 has been a part of that society.
Well, don't get me started on that asshole.
That
But anyway.
Yeah. They actually, it's really funny. Like, they have year after year been like, Trump is never going to be invited to this, and Trump keeps trying to get invited to it, and they're like, no.
Trump is like one of those cool kids at the party. Like, come on, guys, let me in.
Yeah, he's like, can I at least be a guest? And everyone's like, no, God, please. We would rather have Bush Jr. again back out here than deal with you.
But
yeah, so the Skull and Bones, though, is predominantly, it's very white, mostly men, and Protestant origin, right? Meanwhile, over on the Owl Society, which are people who couldn't have joined the Skull and Bones Society, but have enough either connections and money that they end up joining that society instead.
Here's a possibility for you. These society usually are based off of lineage or money and prestige. I'm guessing probably come from mostly 1%er families.
Correct.
So I don't think that I'm getting away from the idea that, you know, they might have started as actual secret societies in the sense that
I think they were nerds, and then it evolved into something more sinister.
Well, yeah, because back at the time when they were founded, you know, only the prestigious did go to these universities. So it probably did start out with the actual secret knowledge and everything else that they're trying to control and hold on to and keep away from the masses. But it sounds like it's gone more into a New World Order thing, wouldn't you say?
Yes, especially because of the fact that you consider the conversations that have come out of the Owl Society when they go out there and they do. It's also called Bohemian Grove. You might have also have heard about it, like with Alex Jones recording a part of their ceremony, which is them worshiping this like 40-foot owl statue and like chanting and stuff like that. And there's a bunch of rituals that occur there. Some people throw it off as just like a long weekend that like all these bigwig conservative people who have a lot of money and resources go to, and it's their 2 weeks of men just being able to be men, and they can do whatever they want. They can pee on the tree and drink as much as they want. They like do 4-hour plays together, and then they just drink their asses off for the entire time. Another thing that happens out of there is about an hour away on Deer Isle is where all the skull and bone children and like wives meet up. And from there, there's a lot of stories that come out of there of like families coming together and being like, okay, I have a daughter who wants to marry her into this society. So then people are like, oh, I want to marry your daughter so I can get into the Owl Society.
That's very old fashioned as far as the arranged marriages go.
Oh yeah, they're super old-fashioned. In fact, for the Owl Society, they did not allow like any type of woman anywhere nearby, like even as staff for the event, until they lost a lawsuit in 1972 against the California Supreme Court against discrimination, and so they had to bring women. And women, though, are only allowed to take on a role of being someone who works in the kitchen or cleaning like the beds and stuff like that.
Those bitches.
Wow. Toxic.
I would be interested to learn the reasoning why women aren't allowed into these societies, because going back to our previous conversations about an older civilizations, including the Egyptian ones, the Egyptians was one of the last ones to do it, but they were a matriarchal society. And the thing that I think, I don't think it's obviously anybody listening to us right now would aspire to, but I think a lot of men now that are all for male power, when they hear matriarchal society, they think it's going to be what we have now, but flipped, where women put the men down, women, they're subservient and everything, which in truth, matriarchal society is where both genders are equal. Gee, sounds like the women's rights movement.
Yeah. So interesting you actually bring that up, because of the fact that although the Owl Society declares that this Bohemian Grove 2 weeks in July, that they can just like have a fun party and everything like that, there have been serious lectures that have been put on by people, right? So some of the most infamous lectures that have been put on, that's been recorded, that people have been able to get a copy of this recording and a copy of like the pamphlets that they hand out during these. One of which is the original CEO behind Fox, and his discussion talk about how essentially you can put fake news out there to rig elections, right? Another one was Anthony Skull. I can't pronounce his last name right now. Supreme Court. He put out a whole lecture pamphlet about how to leverage the judicial branch to go ahead and pull rights away from people, and how to instate more of a less of a separation of church and state at the judicial level, right? Which could then at that point able for them to push on more of like a conservative ideology of like a patriarchal society where, men are more preferred, especially white men, and everything like that. And then another conversation that came out of there was actually the discussion of the atomic bomb. And it was actually after that 2 weeks out in July and all them partying and everything like that, the funding for that bomb just grew astronomically. Like there were millions upon millions of dollars thrown at this, of being like, yes, we need to build this. This is a top priority for us. The Manhattan Project was born out of that group meeting.
Well, yeah, you got the people there with all the money.
Exactly. And you have the people who would be able to push on any type of thing or to build out the justification of the funding at the government level.
All right, so let's do this voting. scale of 1 to 5, 1 you don't believe, 5 you believe. Do you believe secret societies such as, but not limited to, the Skull and Bones are actually just made up of elite, like 1%er families or families of influence that try to dictate and change and control how our world is? I guess that's the best way to sum it up. Would you agree with that, Kasey?
Destiny, you're high on that.
Hell yeah. It's rigged, bitch.
Yeah, I agree with your question asking. I do think, I think it's like a New World Order cabal kind of thing? Not necessarily, but do I think that there are like old organizations that are doing nefarious things together to determine things? Yes, I do.
I would subscribe on a 5 as well, as far as what they're doing today. I don't think that's how they originally started, and I think a small handful of them still aspire to the original teachings as what they had before.
Yeah, I think you still have like those old societies, like the Wolf Cross, I think that's called, over in Yale, which still adhere to the original idea of like just a bunch of nerds getting together and doing cool rituals for fun.
I would totally.
I would totally join a secret if it was a totally like nerd-esque thing where we just get into like, and we go into a forest and we just fake worship a 40-foot owl. And that actually comes out of it. That would be fun. Be locked in the woods for 2 weeks with your best friends, getting drunk as fuck, eating whatever you want, consuming whatever drugs you want, and then just doing plays for each other. That sounds like fun to me.
I don't know. It sounds like a weekend when I did the medieval reenactment stuff.
That's what I'm saying. It could be a giant LARPing session for 2 weeks.
But no, I do think some, like, because to me, like, I know the Masons are a whole nother can of worms in and of itself, but I do believe that the highest orders that they have there still have some secret knowledge from the past that they try to keep alive, but the world is not ready for yet. And, while they do have heavy influence on what goes on in the world, I don't think that they throw their dick around, so to speak.
Right. So from what I've done in my research about it, is Skull and Bones is actually an offshoot off of the Illuminati, and the reason it's an offshoot is because of the fact that the original concept of the Illuminati is to always ensure that when you're enlightened, you're talking from a scientific standpoint, and religion should not be involved in your discussions, right? Skull and Bones disagreed with that. They thought that religion was a component that needed to be talked about for this world.
And that goes back into the whole organized religion trying to control the masses.
Right. And you figure, a bunch of people who adhered on standard to being of part of like a Protestant faith, they're obviously going to start having more of those, conservative traditional values that are highly more sought after.
Yeah, but if they're Protestants and they're not supposed to have idols, why do they worship an idol?
Well, I think that's where the Owl Society probably came about, is it became more evangelical in their ideas rather than Protestant.
That would make sense. All right, see, T is totally a 5. So is Astro. For those that are still awake, it sounds like everybody's on board with this this concept.
Yes.
We're all gonna get put on a government watch list.
Oh, they're watching
guys.
right now. I'm looking at the user list. I'm waiting for somebody to come in like FBI agent.
Hi, NSA.
To be disconnected. A super interesting thing is to honestly look into the backstory of the Bush's family, because it is honestly just amazing how long they've been involved in politics without actually being officially in politics.
Now, I think if they were actually, because I'm still 50-50 on whether, it's very plausible they were involved with the assassination, because there's a lot of parts of that don't feel right. So this is the 60s, right? I'm trying to remember times.
Yeah.
So it's the 60s. Especially for very high in society women, which that's, the presidency launched the Kennedy family into that. They were in it before, but now very much in the spotlight.
Family.
Yeah, I mean they're an old family. They're also another prestigious family, very involved with politics in a lot of the different branches. But something that was oddly pointed out to me by the TV show The Crown, where they did cover the assassination. So the assassination happens. He doesn't die right away. She emerges later after, Mrs. Kennedy emerges later after the death. She's still wearing her clothes from the day before. In those days, and especially before, it was very, very much protocol. You would have gotten cleaned up and presentable, but this was a statement. She was being controlled by somebody, is my feel from that. You know, she wouldn't have gone out in a blood-stained dress from the day before.
It also doesn't make sense. Like, you, from like, I guess kind of a psychological standpoint, you'd want, you know, the president's wife to not be wearing evidence of something like that. You'd want them to be clean clothed, well put together and everything like that to show how strong we are, even though this event did occur.
Yeah, because in The Crown, the Queen commented on, like, this isn't right. This is a statement to someone or about someone. And while, you know, that's just a TV show for entertainment, I do think it strikes a chord with some reality that it was a statement.
A statement on her part, or
no, not her part. I think it was a statement that somebody who had orchestrated it had given by not letting her change and being seen in public on the cameras and everything like that. I think it was a statement, like a signal to maybe somebody else that was part of it, that, look, see, this is what we can do. This is our power.
Interesting. Do you think the CIA was involved at all, though?
That I'm not sure, because I'm not educated enough on the subject to really say one way or another. I think it's highly plausible. Even if it wasn't the CIA, I think another elitist group would have been.
Yeah, I think that there is, just because of the fact that even if you don't subscribe like me to the idea that Bush is the one who potentially called the shots for that, there were so many people in there that weren't even a part of Skull and Bone. They were, you know, other people that just had so much anger towards JFK and wanted, you know, him not to be there. And there have been so many CIA ex-agents who have come out and been like, yeah, there was a kill that was put out for him. These are the people who, and the list has been pretty consistent as far as who is involved in.
Yeah, because I'm not so sure about the CIA, like I said, because I'm not that educated but on the subject, but it really does feel, from what I have seen, that it was orchestrated by a group, and it wouldn't have been just over oil. You know, there had to have been a lot more going on for them to kind of do something like this.
Yeah, I just think back to at that time, it was probably just like someone with a lot of resources. And from what I've done of like researching into the Bush's family, even aside from all of this and their involvement in things, because of the fact that they are so heavily involved into oil and what they've done with that involvement, that kind of gets me to be like, well, he might have not have been the call shotter, but he definitely, I think, was involved in some way, especially when you consider the CIA, the head of the CIA called only him and the Secretary of State to brief them about the JFK assassination. And at the time, Bush wasn't anybody.
I was going to ask, because this is after the assassination was televised, because it was televised live.
Yeah, he was involved in the discussion of like, what should we do from here on out and everything like that.
Yeah, and if he held really no power, because the discussion would have been for the highest members of cabinet.
That's what I'm saying. That's where it gets me to be like, okay, Bush had some type of involvement. In what way? I don't know.
All right, so I don't think we have time for any other subjects today. But I do want to thank you for joining us, Kasey. I always love these conversations because there's so much that fascinates me. And I didn't expect to have an epiphany on stream of like connecting a lot of these things together, but it happened.
Me too.
I think I have a whole picture now for how the whole early society and things, how things are fitting together as far as that's concerned now. It's like, holy shit, it all makes sense. But chat. We do all sorts of rants. It's not just conspiracy theories. We have a lot of things lined up from shall I read a few of these off, Destiny?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So some of the things that we want to do are like weird fetishes. You know, the whole BDSM culture and everything else. I think that would be interesting to talk about, as well as we have such a stigma in the United States. How do other countries handle it? Because I hear other countries handle their adult shops, air quote here, differently than we do, because we have to have windows blacked out and everything, and it's so taboo. Oh my God. So how do other cultures handle this stuff as well? To cancel culture, to a couple different ones actually about body positivity, how it's hard to be a man or a woman, stigmas, social expectations and such, and how that affects us. We also, I think, our next podcast is actually LGBT geared.
Yes.
So we do have quite a few lined up. We are back and in full swing. Destiny, even though she sounds tired, has been very gung-ho about the podcasts as of late. And we've got all these ideas. We are on our every other week schedule. So next weekend we won't have one, but the weekend after we will.
We also plan on doing a Juneteenth cast or podcast.
Yes, a Juneteenth cast, because I think that in the South, they definitely celebrate this. Me being in the North, I don't know much about it, and I think it would be very educational and a much-needed topic.
Mm-hmm.
Amen to that.
Now, keep in mind, even though some of the topics we will be bringing up in the future might be controversial, but we're going to try and do this with some humor for the purposes of education and as a way for people to get their brains working on our outlook about how these social norms are, and a lot of these social norms that are not right from a humanitarian perspective. We're not meaning for them to spark arguments, be derogatory. And in my case, I'm just ignorant on some of these subjects, so I mean no disrespect in any way, shape, or form. People are people first. Everything else is just a category of how we're described.
Exactly.
So I figured I'd give that disclaimer ahead of time.
Yeah, we'll be having, for the LGBT podcast, we'll be having some personal friends of mine, including Kasey. So she'll be returning. And then the Juneteenth podcast that we're going to be doing, we will actually be having another streamer join us. Another one of my friends, her username is Squeeze My Rolls. Her name is also Jewel.
I love her.
She's such a cutie. I would squeeze her rolls.
But yeah, she'll be joining us, and because we want to have a diverse outlook, we want to make sure we represent the right people for that subject. So we'll be including people. We'll be very inclusive, and we welcome you guys to give your input in it as well.
So if there are any other subjects as well that you want us to cover at some point, we've got the 2 Girls 1 Rant channel in my Discord and in Destiny's Discord. Drop a line there if you want to give us some feedback on how you feel that these are going. Do you like what you see? Do you have any suggestions for us of what you would like to see in addition to this? We're all for feedback because we're just starting to get in the swing of things. So don't be afraid to let us know. All right, so with that, I think we're going to wrap it up and end here because my brain is mush, especially after the JFK stuff.
You're welcome.
Hey, I appreciate, like I said, I find this stuff so fascinating. A lot of the stuff, especially when it relates to early history, I love gobbling that stuff up. It's so amazing and wonderful. Everybody, thank you for joining us, and I hope you have enjoyed what you've seen. We are in the process of getting a Ferret Pin YouTube channel set up. It should be ready in a couple of weeks, but these podcasts will be available to listen to later on if you wish to. So with that, thank you again, Kasey.
Thanks for having me again. I love being here. Love talking to y'all.
And of course, my partner in crime, Destiny. All right, take care, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend and enjoy your Memorial Day.
Bye.